I was 27 and 7 months pregnant when the world began to tilt. It was a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky looks like it forgot how to breathe. I'd just left my job at the diner, exhausted but proud. The pregnancy wasn't easy, but I kept working because my parents had made one thing clear. "If you're old enough to get yourself pregnant," Mom had hissed one night, "you're old enough to pay for it." They hadn't visited once since my bump started to show. My sister, Miranda, on the other hand, got a full baby shower for her cat's kittens. That was the rhythm of my family. Her mistakes were cute. Mine were catastrophic. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. That morning, I was cutting through the parking lot when the dizziness hit. The world spun and my body folded like paper. When I woke up, there were hospital lights, white, endless, and cruel. A nurse with kind eyes said softly, "You've lost a lot of blood. We're arranging a transfusion." "Is the baby?" I whispered, throat raw. "He's fighting," she said, "but we need a donor soon." My blood type was rare. I gave them my emergency contacts, my parents' number, my sister's. They nodded, reassured, and I waited. Hours passed. The baby's heart monitor flickered on the screen beside me, steady, then shaky. When the doctor finally came back, he wasn't smiling. "Your mother answered," he said quietly. I blinked. She'll come?" He hesitated. "She said..." His voice faltered. "She said you've always drained them dry, and if you're dying, you can drain alone." The words didn't hit all at once. They sank slowly, like poison. I couldn't even cry, just stared at the ceiling, cold and shaking, my hands pressed against my belly. "I'm sorry," I whispered to my son. "You don't deserve this." By nightfall, the nurses had found a match from a donor bank, but the delay nearly took both of us. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The machines were gone. The pain wasn't. A nurse, the same one, touched my shoulder gently. "You and your boy made it. He's still tiny, but he's strong. You're both strong." I smiled weakly. "Did my family call?" She looked down. "No, but a stranger did. The man who donated blood. He said to tell you. Some lives are worth saving even when others don't see it." I wanted to thank him, to find him, but I couldn't move yet. Instead, I stared at the window and watched the sunrise burn through the fog. That was the first time in months I felt something that wasn't pain. It was anger. Quiet, deliberate, holy anger. Mom once told me, "Blood is thicker than water." That night, I realized, it's only thicker if it's not poisoned. I went home a week later, my newborn in my arms, his tiny fingers gripping my shirt like he already knew what survival felt like. No one was there to greet me, but I didn't expect them to be. I looked around that empty apartment, bare walls and all, and whispered, "You'll never know what they took from me, and I'll make sure they never forget what they lost." Because love wasn't in my bloodline anymore, it was in my son's heartbeat. The first week home felt like learning how to breathe underwater. Everything was quiet, too quiet. No baby monitor, no soft lullabies. Just my boy's fragile breaths against my chest and the hum of the old fridge in my one-room apartment. Every time I blinked, I saw that hospital room, the line on the monitor, the doctor's eyes when he repeated my mother's words. "She said you've always drained them dry, and if you're dying, you can drain alone." Those words had nested in my skull like broken glass. I hadn't told anyone, not even the nurse who checked on me twice a week. But at night, when I'd rock my son to sleep, I'd whisper promises into his tiny ear. "You'll never beg for love. I'll make sure of that." Days blurred into weeks. My body healed faster than I thought it could. My mind didn't. I got a part-time job at a small floral shop down the street. The owner, Mrs. Hall, was a widow who'd lost her daughter in childbirth years ago. When she found out I was alone, she pressed her hand over mine and said, "Then you'll have me." I cried in the back room that day, quietly, so my baby wouldn't see. The money wasn't much, but it was honest. I'd make bouquets for weddings, for birthdays, all the celebrations I'd never been invited to. And sometimes, when brides came in with their mothers, laughing, fighting over centerpieces, I'd smile and say nothing, But inside, I was collecting something. Not envy, not hate, just evidence. Evidence of what love could look like when it wasn't poisoned. Then one afternoon, 3 months later, I got a call. My sister Miranda. I almost dropped the phone. "Hey," she said, voice dripping with false warmth. "You alive?" I froze. "Barely," I muttered. She laughed. "Good. Mom was worried you'd pull another stunt for attention." "Another what?" "You know," she said. "The fainting, the hospital thing. You scared her half to death. She said you'd do this to make her feel guilty." For a moment I couldn't speak. Then I said quietly, "Tell her she doesn't have to worry. Guilt's something she doesn't feel anyway." Miranda scoffed. "Whatever. Listen, there's a family dinner next week. Dad wants you to come. To make peace, I guess." Peace. That word hit like a joke told at a funeral. But I went. Not because I wanted peace, because I wanted to see what guilt looked like when it finally ran out of excuses. Their house was the same. Cold air, fake flowers, the smell of control. Mom opened the door, her lips pulling tight when she saw the baby in my arms. "Oh, you brought him," she said, like I'd shown up with a stray dog. Dad didn't even look up from his phone. "Don't drip milk on the carpet." I sat at the edge of the couch, feeding my son, watching my mother pretend to care. "So," she said, pouring wine. "He looks healthy. Must have been a miracle, huh?" Her tone wasn't awe. It was annoyance. I met her gaze. No, it was a blood donor, a stranger. Her hand stopped mid-air. "Excuse me?" "The doctor said you refused, said you told them I could drain alone." Dad chuckled. "Oh, come on, we were joking. You always take things too seriously." "Yeah," Mom added, recovering her smirk. "We didn't think you'd actually—" "Die?" I finished for her. "You didn't think I'd die?" The silence was heavy enough to cut through. Miranda broke it with a small laugh. "Don't make it dramatic. You're here, aren't you?" I looked at her. "And you're still proud of yourself?" She blinked. "For what?" "For doing nothing." Mom sighed. "God, you're still the same. Always the victim." I stared at her, calm now. "You're right," I said softly. "I was the victim, once." Then I stood, grabbed my son's blanket, and left without another word. Behind me, Mom's voice echoed down the hallway. "Don't come back when you need something again." I didn't look back. I just whispered, "I won't." That night, I stayed awake thinking about how easily they'd erased me, how confidently they carried on like nothing happened. That was when the idea formed, not revenge through rage, but through absence, through silence that made their world smaller, lonelier, duller. I started saving every extra dollar, working double shifts. Mrs. Hall let me bring the baby to the shop, and soon he'd nap behind the counter while I arranged roses. She said, "You know what's funny? Flowers grow best when they're cut." I smiled at that. Maybe people did too. A year later, I got a better apartment, then a car, then a management role at a nursery chain that supplied flowers across the county. Every milestone, I'd take a photo with my son and frame it, a timeline of quiet victories. One afternoon, I got a letter. No return address. Just a short note in my mother's handwriting. "Your father is sick. He needs a transfusion. You're his match, please." I stared at it for a long time. I folded it neatly. Then I walked to the window, held it over a candle flame, and watched the paper curl to ash. That night, I sat with my son at the table. He was older now, laughing as he drew flowers on scrap paper. "Mommy, why do you smile like that?" he asked. I brushed his hair back and said, "Because some people finally learned what alone feels like." Months passed after that letter burned to ash, and with each sunrise, I felt lighter, not healed, but hollow in a way that didn't hurt anymore. It's strange how silence can become your shield. For years, their voices had filled every corner of my mind, my mother's sharp words, my father's mocking laughter, Miranda's lazy cruelty. Now it was replaced by something softer, my son's giggles, the sound of running water, the quiet hum of peace. One afternoon, as I was closing up the flower shop, Mrs. Hall called from the back. "You've got visitors." I thought she meant customers. When I looked up, I froze. It was them. My mother, dressed too formally for the tiny shop, her lips tight like she'd rather be anywhere else. And behind her, my father, thinner, older, walking slower. Miranda stood between them, her expression nervous but coated with entitlement. For a second, I felt 16 again, small, trembling, waiting for approval that never came. Then I remembered who I was now. Mom didn't waste time. "We need to talk," she said, scanning the store like she couldn't believe I owned something decent. "You already did," I said calmly, arranging a vase of lilies. "Years ago, when I was dying." She stiffened. "This isn't about that. Your father's condition is worsening. You're his match. The doctors said," I cut her off. "So you need my blood." Dad cleared his throat, looking anywhere but me. "You wouldn't let your old man die, would you?" There it was. That tone. The same one he used when I was a kid, when he'd say, "Don't embarrass us," or "Stop being dramatic." The tone that made every plea sound like a threat. I smiled slightly. "Funny. That's almost word for word what you said when I needed yours." He blinked. "That was different." "Yeah," I said. "Back then, I didn't matter." Miranda stepped forward. "Come on, just do it and stop acting like a saint. He's still your dad." I turned to her. "And he's still the man who laughed when Mom called me a drain. The man who watched me bleed and said nothing." She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic again." I looked right at her, my voice low. "You filmed my son crying, Miranda. Remember? You called it family entertainment." I buried the sound of that scream in my chest every night. "So tell me again, who's being dramatic?" No one spoke. Mrs. Hall peeked out from the back, realized the storm brewing, and quietly retreated. Finally, Mom broke the silence. "So you'll let him die?" I didn't answer. She stepped closer, her perfume sharp and bitter. "You're proving us right, you know. Selfish. Always were." I leaned forward, my tone calm but cutting. "Selfish is watching your child beg for life and walking away. I just learned it from the best." Their faces, all three of them, shifted. The arrogance cracked, replaced by something raw and fragile. Realization that they'd finally found the one person they couldn't control. I didn't raise my voice, didn't cry. I just said, "There's nothing left in me that belongs to you. Not my blood, not my pity, not even my name. I..." Turned away and began sweeping petals off the floor. They stood there for a few seconds longer, unsure if they should beg or curse me. Then quietly, they left. After the bell above the door stopped ringing, I stood still, my hands trembling. Not from guilt, from freedom. Weeks later, I got a letter, not from them, but from the hospital. "Patient refused further treatment," it said. "No emergency contact listed." I folded it and placed it inside a drawer under a photograph of my son's first birthday. That night, as my boy slept beside me, I looked at him, his little chest rising and falling, his fingers curled into a fist, even in dreams. I thought about the blood they'd refused to give, and how I'd built an entire life from the emptiness it left behind. I whispered into the quiet, "We survived without them, baby. And that's worth more than anything they could have given." He stirred slightly, smiling in his sleep. I brushed his hair aside and kissed his forehead. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle, steady, cleansing. The same kind that used to terrify me, that now sounded like applause. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud or cruel. It's the sight of people realizing they lost the one person who still had love left to give. And as I watched the storm through the window, I knew they'd remember that silence for the rest of their lives. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.